Well, good morning again, everybody, or good evening, or good whatever. We are gathered again for another edition of You and Me and Multiple Sclerosis, and I continue to hope that we can be something of an online support group for one another. Not professionals by any stretch, but people who know what it's like to live with multiple sclerosis or live with someone who has multiple sclerosis. If you're a caregiver, or even if you're an interested friend and you just want to be more sensitive about it and to know a little more about it. Well, today I wanted to talk a little more about something I brought up a couple episodes ago, and that had to do with the fatigue of disability. In other words, there is fatigue that is involved in just the mere act of living with a chronic illness, where everything that you do takes more energy than it would take the average person, the person who is not battling a chronic illness. So anything from getting dressed in the morning to walking around the block to feeding your dog or changing the cat litter box or that task that, okay, maybe people might not think it's the most pleasant thing in the world, but they would have the energy to do it. Whereas with MS, we count the cost, right? Every time we undertake something, we think it through in great detail because we want to be sure that we're going to have enough energy to actually make it through the process. And I wanted to talk a little bit today about how minimalism, it's a concept that I'm seeing an awful lot about lately and have been following pretty closely now for about a year. How minimalism has some principles that I think can really help with the fatigue of disability and how we handle that. When we think of minimalism, if you're not familiar with how it's being used these days, there is a way that it's used in the art world or in architecture or whatnot, but the way it's used for lifestyle choice has a lot to do with how much stuff you have in your life, and that's physical stuff as well as the mental stuff that's swirling around in your head. The email, the digital clutter, everything in your life. If it gets to a point that you can't really cope well with it, then you really can consider it clutter and it needs to be reduced in some way. And I am never going to be a minimalist. I'll tell you right now, that's just not going to happen. I enjoy having things around me, and I'm not overly sentimental, but there are things that I really enjoy having. So I'm going to keep those, and I'm sure that you feel the same way. But at the same time, I think there's some principles that minimalism talks about that we can benefit from. People with MS can really benefit from. For example, if you look behind me, if you watched my videos, the previous ones, you'll see that the curtains behind me are different from what I had before. And it wasn't just because, I wanted a different color or whatever. That had nothing to do with it, really, in the long run. It had to do more with fatigue of disability. The curtains that you see behind me, they cover my main closet. Mine and my husband's both. We keep a lot of our clothes in there. Well, it gets difficult if you have curtains covering your closet that are difficult to move. And the ones that I had before, they went through that same curtain rod that you see there, but they were the kind where they had the sleeve and it just kind of goes in there. But it was fairly tight to the rod, so I couldn't really push them back to get at what was inside. I found myself kind of parting them and walking under them, and then they would drape over on top of me, and it was dark in there, and just very, very difficult for me to work with it. Well, in the other room, we have a smaller version of the same idea, and we put up the same kind of rod, but the curtain that we got was one that had the large grommets like you see behind me. And what's really nice about these is that they slide, and let me get up and see if I can demonstrate that for you. There, you see how that just slides, and then when I'm done in here, I can just put them back the way they were. As they say, easy peasy lemon squeezy, right? And it's not a big deal. but it makes a huge difference for me as I navigate through my day. Another thing that I'll share with you is that for a lot of my loungewear, sleepwear, casual clothes that who cares if they got a few wrinkles in them, I gave up struggling with hangers. And I got one of those hanging cloth divided storage units that hangs in the closet. And all I do now is I just roll up my night shirts and my running pants and whatever, my sweatpants, some of my sweatshirts. I just roll them up and stick them in there. Okay, it's never going to win awards for beauty, certainly not. But it's so much easier than fighting with hangers. I hate fighting with hangers. It just really tires me. So those are just little things that I learned how to do, and they help me a lot. Now, I also wanted to talk about something that one of the people that I follow, she calls herself the Minimal Mom. Her name is Dawn Madsen, and she lives in Minnesota. Well, she has embraced minimalism wholeheartedly. A lot of her videos, though, talk about just principles that she has learned from her reading or talking with other people. Talks about the contrast between freedom and options. And I know that a lot of people think freedom consists of having options, but as she went on to describe it more, to explain it, I thought it was really fascinating because there is freedom in not having options sometimes. And I thought about that and how it already has applied to my life. Now, you may or may not like the way I wear my hair, but I have to tell you, I have been wearing my hair that way since high school. If you saw pictures of me in high school, you'd say, yeah, she pretty much has the same hair, long, straight, parted on the side. Yeah, I know it's a lot grayer now than it was then. But I made a choice very early on in my life that I didn't want to have to mess with my hair and worry about it getting messed up by the wind or whatever. It has no actual style, right? Fine, I have freedom though. I have freedom. I also have freedom in makeup. I don't wear makeup and I never have. And that's a freedom for me. Now, that doesn't mean that I choose freedom every time and in every aspect of my life. There are some places in my life where I want options. I actually have a very large book collection. Now, I have downsized it, but it's still like way huger than probably anybody else that I know. But I like having the options. I like going up into my library, my own personal library that my husband made for me, and being able to look at the different books and choose what I want to read. That's an area of my life where I want options. I also like having options in clothing. That doesn't bother me to have a lot of different things that I can choose to wear, because it's always a joy to me to fix my outfit, to put something together that looks halfway nice. And I don't mind that. So yeah, just make a choice in your life. If you cook a lot, well, you're going to want the options, right? You're going to want the variety. You're going to want a pantry that's full of different things. Your spice cabinet is going to look pretty extensive compared to other people's. But if you're not much of a cook, if you don't spend much time in the kitchen, you sure don't want to be hunting around through the drawer to find the right size measuring cup when you're trying to make something. I think that's really a very important thing for us to think about when we consider that having MS and having only a certain amount of energy for the day, we need to be very careful how we spend it. And I think that, if you look at your own life and think about when you choose freedom versus when you choose options, it's really going to be interesting for you. And you might even think to yourself, there's some areas where I really need to curtail the number of options that I have because it just wears me out too much. Maybe you want to have the freedom of fewer choices. I love that principle, and I think I'm really going to be looking into how I want to do that in the coming year. I know they always talk about, New Year's resolutions and all, and I'm not really a big fan of those, but if I were to make one, it would probably have something to do with reviewing my life and seeing where those options might be that I don't really need to have in my life, and that I'm going to get the freedom that comes from having fewer options. I'll link Dawn's video down below because I think it's really good, even though The freedom versus options part is only part of what she has to say. But this way you'll know where I got the information from.